this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
Request denied. The duchy is not a safety net for bad decisions. Those were the sharp words fired off by Prince William on the morning of January 20th, 2026, his first big move as acting sovereign since the official handover of duties at the start of the year. The message? A direct rejection of his brother Prince Harry's urgent plea for a $36 million royal bailout. But this wasn't just a no, it was a public reality check, a royal reckoning that echoed through every marble hallway of the palace. For Prince Harry, that cold response marked the end of his last lifeline, officially cut at 9:15 a.m. sharp. Palace insiders confirmed that the Duke of Sussex had personally reached out to his brother, asking for immediate financial help after a brutal string of setbacks, the biggest one being the looming foreclosure of his $14.6 million Montecito mansion. That home, famously dubbed Riven Rock, had been the Sussexes' so-called sanctuary of freedom until everything came crashing down. Just 2 days earlier, on January 18th, the couple received a termination notice from their homeowner's insurance company, bluntly stating that their policy was canceled effective immediately. The reason? Failure to meet compliance updates amid rising wildfire threats sweeping across California's luxury estates and in Santa Barbara's elite housing market, where environmental risk decides financial survival. That misstep had devastating consequences. Within hours, J.P. Morgan Chase, the lender behind the Sussexes' $9.5 million mortgage, pulled a shocking move. They triggered a hidden default clause buried deep in the fine print, one that allowed them to seize the property just because the insurance had lapsed. No matter his spotless payment record, the only way out for Harry was a forced-placed emergency insurance policy, one that demanded a $400,000 upfront payment within 48 hours. But here's the twist. Harry didn't have the cash ready. Instead of looping in his lawyers or financial advisors, he picked up the phone and called Kensington Palace directly, cutting straight through royal protocol like it didn't exist. And this wasn't some humble ask. Insiders at the Duchy of Cornwall leaked that Harry's request was a jaw-dropping breakdown of demands: $400,000 for reinstating insurance, $1.2 million to cover taxes, legal fees and tuition through March, $7 million to shield against Netflix-related liabilities, and a massive $30 million for long-term asset protection through secretive blind trust structures. That's a total of $36.3 million, all requested in one shot. Prince William didn't waste time. He went through the entire appeal in under 20 minutes. His official reply came through Sir Eric Worthington, the monarchy's legendary financial integrity officer and senior auditor of the duchy, known for his unshakable discipline. His words were final and cold as stone. No funds shall be released. The matter is closed. The Crown cannot be party to reputational or financial salvage. Sources say William's decision wasn't fueled by anger, but by duty. He acted with precision, grounded in law, accountability, and the modern reality of a monarchy forced to evolve. This wasn't about personal grudges. It was purely structural. But for Harry, the rejection hit like a storm. Desperate and humiliated, he took it up the ladder, hoping his father, King Charles III, would step in and override William's ruling. Instead, the king's response came back swift and merciless. At exactly 8:40 a.m., a private letter stamped with the royal seal left Sandringham, co-signed by both King Charles III and Princess Anne, who had quietly co-led the Sussex financial audit over the previous 6 weeks. The message inside was cold, final, and unmistakable. There will be no duchy funds, no grace in favor extensions, and no further institutional correspondence regarding the Montecito property. The matter is concluded. I recommend liquidation at the earliest window. And just like that, in 5 brutal lines, the king confirmed what the world had whispered for months: Prince Harry was officially cut off, no longer tied to the royal system, financially, logistically, or symbolically. But this wasn't a snap decision made in anger. It had been brewing quietly for months. The real story began back on December 8, 2025, when William, tipped off by internal murmurs about questionable financial moves, ordered a confidential audit into the Sussexes' money trail. He put Sir Eric Worthington in charge of the investigation, joined by Princess Anne, whose razor-sharp discipline and moral authority made her the perfect watchdog. Over 3 tense weeks, their team uncovered a tangled web: reckless spending, overpromised charity funds, and financial dealings that risked tarnishing the crown's reputation. By the time the report hit the king's desk, the royal family had one clear conclusion: the Sussex chapter, financially speaking, was closed for good. One revelation from the audit shook the royal core to its foundation. It traced all the way back to the couple's lavish royal wedding on May 19, 2018, broadcast to a jaw-dropping audience of 1.9 billion people. During the event, Harry and Meghan had made a public promise. Every £2.1 million in gifts and proceeds would go to the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, a charity overseen by Princess Catherine and devoted to educating vulnerable children. But the audit uncovered something explosive. A huge chunk of that pledged money never reached the charity at all. Instead, it was quietly funneled into a Delaware-based company called M&M Projects LLC, an entity reportedly used to finance pre-production for Meghan's now-cancelled Netflix series Pearl. The Sussex team tried to justify it, calling it a mission-aligned operational shift. But Sir Eric Worthington didn't mince words. He labeled it a misappropriation of trust in spirit, if not in law. When King Charles III reviewed the files on January 12th, his reported reaction was just 3 chilling words, "So it was true." From there, the fallout was brutal and fast. When Harry sent one last handwritten plea to Buckingham Palace on January 13th, there was no royal crest on the reply because no reply ever came. Just silence. Then came the policy. Then came the exile. Within 48 hours, everything collapsed. Not just the Montecito mansion facing foreclosure, but every remaining bridge of support across royal, financial, and even Hollywood circles. If Prince William's rejection had slammed the royal gates shut, what followed was the death of Hollywood goodwill. It all began with one name, Tyler Perry. For nearly 5 years, Perry had been Harry and Meghan's strongest private ally. Back in March 2020, as the couple fled Canada under intense media and security pressure, Perry opened his Beverly Hills estate to them, offering both safety and discretion. But by early 2026, even that once solid friendship was starting to crack under the weight of controversy. It was Tyler Perry who once threw open the doors of his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion to Harry and Meghan, giving them sanctuary when their world was falling apart. He spent over $3 million on private security during their chaotic move, arranged transportation, and even pulled strings for top-tier legal and PR teams. Publicly, Perry said, "I did it for the children." But behind closed doors, his generosity came with 3 clear expectations: discretion, gratitude, and silence. That fragile understanding shattered on January 18th, 2026. On that day, Meghan Markle appeared on an unauthorized lifestyle podcast run by a small-time Hollywood influencer, and what was meant to sound emotional quickly turned explosive. In that unscripted talk, Meghan made 3 shocking claims: that Tyler Perry had abandoned her during a personal crisis, that he had weaponized his role as godfather to Princess Lilibet, and that he allegedly used his royal connections for prestige and access. Those words set off a media firestorm. Within hours, social networks lit up, talk shows replayed every quote, and talent agents were scrambling for statements. Perry didn't waste a second. Within 24 hours, his legal team assembled a mountain of receipts, bank transfers, travel records, and detailed correspondence, all proving that every single act of help had been done at Harry and Meghan's direct request, not Perry's initiative. Then came the real heartbreak. When Harry called Perry the very next day, hoping for a $400,000 lifeline to stop the insurance-triggered foreclosure, Perry didn't hold back. His reply was ice cold, but honest to the core. "I'm not the bank of the Godfather anymore," Perry reportedly told him. "You defaulted on something more important than money." That single line cut deeper than any financial loss. It marked the collapse of their most powerful friendship in Hollywood. "You defaulted on gratitude." Those were the last words Perry ever spoke to Harry, short, final, and unforgettable. The call barely lasted 3 minutes, and there was no follow-up, no apology, no repair attempt. Perry's quiet departure sent shockwaves through Hollywood, signaling one thing loud and clear: the Sussexes were no longer safe to support. By January 19th, internal memos were already circulating across WME, CAA, and Netflix. Legal departments called emergency meetings, updating risk reports, and reassessing every partnership tied to the Sussex name. The fallout was instant. Reputations were on the line, and no studio wanted to be next in the storm. At a private crisis session on January 17th, WME's top legal advisors reportedly warned Meghan in writing, any further mention of Tyler Perry's name in interviews, pitches, or private talks could trigger defamation claims or even force disclosure of private correspondence. But the harshest blow came that very same day from Netflix. Under their highly publicized $100 million content deal, Harry and Meghan had 5 key projects on the table. Harry and Meghan, the docu-series, completed but massively over budget. Pearl, Meghan's animated project, canceled mid-development. Heart of Invictus, delayed indefinitely. A scripted royal drama, shelved before production even began. A children's special flopped with critics and tanked commercially. With just one finished project and several breaches of deliverables, Netflix pulled the trigger on a hidden performance clause buried deep in their 2020 contract. On January 17th, Harry and Meghan were formally served with a $20 million clawback demand. It was Netflix's way of saying the deal was done, the money was gone, and the honeymoon was officially over. A leaked legal brief reviewed by Legacy's Edge classified the Sussexes' Netflix portfolio as non-compliant. One executive summed it up with brutal honesty. "This isn't a creative dispute, it's a contract failure." That single statement captured the reality everyone in the industry already knew. The partnership had completely unraveled. By January 17th, the collapse had spilled over into their charity, Archwell Foundation. All grant disbursements had been frozen since October 2025. The UK Mayfair office shut down, and the US staff reduced to just 2 part-time contractors. Internal emails stopped circulating altogether, and the foundation's website had gone silent for more than 40 days. Although Archwell wasn't officially dissolved, filings revealed it had entered administrative suspension, a pre-liquidation status often used by nonprofits to stall lawsuits while protecting remaining funds. According to the latest financial statements, the foundation was hanging by a thread, holding just under $1.1 million in unrestricted cash, barely enough to keep the lights on through March 2026. With the Crown refusing support, Netflix pulling back, and Archwell frozen in limbo, Harry and Meghan found themselves completely isolated. As one former board member put it in frustration, they didn't burn bridges, they set fire to the whole coastline. Meanwhile, the walls were closing in fast. Their Riven Rock estate in Montecito, once branded as their haven of freedom, was now a ticking financial time bomb. With foreclosure just hours away and every safety net gone, the couple was cornered. In a last-ditch move during the early hours of January 20th, 2026, the Sussexes made a desperate and secret attempt to liquidate the only major asset they had left, their home. The mansion that once symbolized independence and rebirth had turned into the final stage of a royal downfall, its gates closing in sync with the last hours of their financial freedom. Riven Rock, the sprawling 18,000-square-foot, 9-bedroom mansion tucked deep in the hills of Santa Barbara County, had once stood as the ultimate symbol of Harry and Meghan's freedom, fame, and reinvention. But now, stripped of insurance, tangled in contract breaches, and drowning in public scandal, the property had turned into the epicenter of a silent disaster. Behind its pristine hedges and guarded gates, a covert operation was quietly underway. Desperate to avoid headlines, the Sussexes activated what insiders call a protocol lapis sale, a secretive NDA-bound off-market listing method used only by the world's ultra-rich elite. The goal? To unload the estate without ever letting the public know it was up for sale. No glossy photos, no open houses, not even a public listing. Just hushed conversations between top-tier real estate agents serving Gulf royals, Silicon Valley billionaires, and foreign dignitaries. But the plan backfired spectacularly. Within just 48 hours, at least 4 vetted buyers reportedly backed out, one after another. When asked why, a Beverly Hills realtor put it bluntly: "The house is beautiful, but buying it means inheriting the Sussex name, and right now, that name is Radioactive." Behind closed doors, investors listed 3 major red flags keeping them away: litigation risk, ongoing legal disputes with Netflix, employment disputes, potential lawsuits from former Archwell staff, tax exposure, concerns tied to the estate's partial nonprofit use. And that wasn't the end of it. The house's insurance nightmare made things even worse. After the January 18th lapse, Riven Rock's wildfire risk rating spiked dramatically, sending lenders and underwriters into panic mode. The once coveted property that had embodied their dream of royal freedom in California had now become a symbol of downfall and danger, a luxury fortress no one dared to claim. The situation at Riven Rock only grew more dire. The property's skyrocketing insurance premiums made it nearly impossible to sell, limiting the buyer pool to cash-only billionaires willing to take on the risk. But money wasn't the only problem. Public image toxicity had become a deal-breaker. For high-profile buyers in global finance or government circles, associating with a royal brand in decline was simply too dangerous. One Gulf investor, after viewing drone footage of the mansion, summed up his verdict in just 6 devastating words: "A liability wrapped in landscaped perfection." Inside the once grand estate, the unraveling was heartbreaking. On January 16th, Harry and Meghan moved out of the master wing, retreating with their children to the guest house suite tucked behind the pool, an area once reserved for VIP visitors and royal security teams. By January 18th, the scene looked more like an evacuation than a relocation. Aerial footage captured moving trucks in the driveway, furniture covered in tarps, and the private gym stripped bare. Artwork and archive boxes were being carefully labeled and sealed for storage. Even the theater room, once their pride and joy, was dismantled, its screens and sound systems removed piece by piece. According to 2 former household staff who were laid off that week, the mansion had turned into a ghost estate. One described the moment with haunting honesty. They weren't moving to a new palace, they were shrinking into silence. Leaked HR records from Archwell's domestic operations painted an even bleaker picture. Staffing had been slashed. 2 full-time nannies replaced by 1 part-time caregiver working month to month with no renewal guarantee. The couple's private chef, employed for nearly 3 years, was let go on January 3rd. What had once been a symbol of wealth and freedom was now a silent fortress of decline, its hallways echoing with the sound of boxes closing and doors locking, the final quiet phase of a royal retreat gone painfully public. By mid-January, security at Riven Rock had been scaled back to a single daily patrol shift. Even the perimeter motion sensors along the east side of the property, once part of a top-tier defense system, were deactivated. Landscaping visits, which used to happen twice a week, were cut to bi-weekly, and the estate's drone surveillance program, once used to keep paparazzi at bay, had been grounded indefinitely. Even routine deliveries began slowing to a near standstill. One neighbor who asked to remain anonymous told Legacy's Edge, "It's like watching someone move out in slow motion. Every week there's fewer people, fewer lights, more curtains drawn." But the hardest change wasn't about security or luxury, it was about the kids. For the past 2 years, Archie and Lilibet had been enrolled at the Kate School, one of California's most prestigious prep institutions, known for its ocean views, elite network, and $48,000 plus annual tuition. Kate had been more than a school, it was a sanctuary, offering both education and insulation from the chaos of fame. But on January 8th, both children were quietly withdrawn from the school. There was no heartfelt farewell, no public announcement, only a brief now-deleted comment from Meghan on a small influencer podcast. "We're focusing on emotional wellness and giving the children space to just be children." Behind those polished words, however, lay a far different truth. California Department of Education records later confirmed that Archie and Lilibet were transferred to Laguna Blanca School, a smaller, more understated institution in Santa Barbara, where annual tuition ranges between $27,750 depending on grade level. The move may have been framed as a parenting choice, but insiders saw the financial motive. The switch represented an estimated $40,000 in yearly savings. The once grand illusion of limitless wealth and royal resilience was fading, replaced by quiet cutbacks, shuttered windows, and a growing sense that the Sussex dream in California was slowly, painfully, slipping away. The family's shift to Laguna Blanca came with major trade-offs: less security, no royal-linked donor protections, fewer celebrity families, and with that, far less anonymity. One Kate School faculty member didn't hold back, saying, "It wasn't about wellness, it was about money." The kids disappeared overnight, and that's all anyone knew. By January 19th, the Grand Montecito estate had shrunk into what one insider called a vacation-sized footprint. The staff wing was locked and sealed. The children's separate rooms were merged into a single shared nursery, and access to the main house was now limited to one rotating cleaner. Meghan's once busy office suite, where deals were planned and Zoom calls once echoed, was now completely cleared of personal items. Even their social world had collapsed in silence. Friends who once packed the garden for Archie's 2nd birthday in 2021 hadn't RSVP'd to a single invitation since late 2025. Holiday cards were returned unopened. Messages went unanswered. The same Hollywood circle that once celebrated their independence now kept a careful public distance. The decline wasn't just financial, it was existential. As one former staffer put it, they wanted the royal legacy without the royal discipline, and now they have neither. Then, at 7 a.m. on January 20th, 2026, the final act began. A courier bearing the royal insignia arrived quietly at the gates of 765 Rockbridge Road, Montecito. He wasn't a diplomat, and he brought no olive branch, only a sealed envelope. Inside were 5 lines, signed personally by His Majesty King Charles III, stamped with the Sandringham House seal, and marked private but enforceable. Whatever was written in that document would mark the official end of the Sussexes' financial and royal ties, a quiet royal decree delivered not with ceremony or cameras, but with a simple knock at a gate that no longer led to a palace, only to what was left of a fallen dream. There will be no duchy funds, no grace and favor extensions, and no further institutional correspondence regarding the Montecito property. The matter is concluded. I recommend liquidation at the earliest window. Those 5 lines weren't just a legal response, they were a moral decree. For Prince Harry, still staggering from his January 20th court loss over the Riven Rock mortgage default, the message was crystal clear. There would be no rescue, not from his father, not from the crown, not ever again. To Harry, the letter represented more than a financial setback. It was the final confirmation that his royal lifeline had been permanently severed. To the institution, however, it was a statement of principle, the inevitable outcome of months of quiet preparation. Behind that formal rejection was a process already locked in motion. By the time Harry made his emotional appeal in late December 2025, the monarchy's financial firewall had already been solidified under the Sovereign Grant Transparency Protocol, enacted back in July 2024. That protocol, born from the public outrage surrounding the financial scandals of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, had redrawn the boundaries of royal finance forever. It explicitly barred the use of Crown estate or duchy funds for private mortgages, debt settlements unrelated to royal duties, legal costs for personal lawsuits, failed commercial ventures, and security for individuals removed from active royal service. Any exemption to those rules would require parliamentary approval, and Harry's request received none. So when Prince William issued his rejection, it wasn't an act of coldness, it was procedure. According to palace insiders, on December 8, 2025, after getting word of Harry's renewed financial distress, William immediately authorized Sir Eric Worthington and Princess Anne to conduct a full audit of the Sussexes' financial and charitable dealings. That report, delivered on January 3rd, became the foundation of the Crown's final decision, a decision that didn't just shut a financial door, but symbolically ended Harry's standing within the royal system itself. The audit report landed like a thunderclap. Its pages held three devastating conclusions. First, the long-promised £2.1 million wedding donation, once pledged by Harry and Meghan to the Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, had been rerouted to M&M Projects LLC, a Delaware shell company linked to Meghan's failed Netflix series Pearl, The Palace. Desperate to avoid a public scandal, had secretly backfilled £1.8 million in 2021 to cover the shortfall and keep the matter buried. Second, the auditors found that over the span of 5 years, the Sussexes had displayed a consistent pattern of financial mismanagement, turning royal assets into monetized content, and leveraging public sympathy to fund private ventures. Third, they concluded this wasn't bad luck. It was a repeated strategic failure. This wasn't misfortune, Prince William reportedly told aides. It was mismanagement, and we won't inherit the consequences. His closing directive was clear and firm. No bailout, no exceptions. When the report reached Princess Anne, her reaction was reportedly one of controlled fury. Known for her steel discipline and incorruptible ethics, she pored over the transcript from Harry and Meghan's 2018 wedding speech, underlining a single line in red ink. "We will honor Diana's spirit by giving back, not taking more." Below it, she added her own handwritten note. This wasn't a mistake, it was a strategy, and we paid for it. For years, the monarchy had shielded the Sussex brand from total collapse, managing the press, funding appearances, and absorbing fallout. But now, that protection was officially over. When the final audit was delivered to King Charles on January 12th, he didn't speak right away. Insiders say he sat in silence for several minutes, scanning the report line by line. But later that evening, at Sandringham, the king convened a private meeting with his finance committee and legal advisors. Whatever was said behind those closed doors marked the beginning of the end of royal protection for the Sussexes and the start of full accountability. The finance and legal committees reached their verdict without hesitation. The decision was unanimous. Any move to subsidize Prince Harry, they concluded, would violate royal protocol, public trust, and the law itself. King Charles III gave his official response the next morning, 5 lines long, precise, and final. While the world expected fireworks or emotion, Buckingham Palace remained calm and deliberate. As one senior Privy Council advisor explained, this isn't about punishment, it's about precedent. From the king's perspective, the monarchy had already learned its lesson years earlier. In 2021, when Prince Andrew faced civil charges tied to Jeffrey Epstein, the palace had refused to fund his legal settlement, a £12 million payout that ultimately came from Andrew's private trust. Alongside that, he was stripped of all royal duties and lost his grace and favor housing. Even Sarah Ferguson had faced similar consequences. Despite moments of public sympathy, her business collapses and tabloid controversies prompted the monarchy to issue asset rationalization orders in mid-2024, which led to her eviction from Royal Lodge by December of that year. These events hardened the palace's stance under the Sovereign Grant Transparency Protocol, making one principle absolutely clear: no more silent subsidies. As one internal memo reportedly phrased it, the monarchy cannot subsidize those who walked away from it. King Charles himself reaffirmed that message during a private briefing with his advisors, saying, "That is not cruelty, that is clarity." Though Charles signed the final letter, insiders agree it was Prince William's leadership that truly defined the tone and direction of the decision. As acting sovereign, William had already begun shaping a new royal standard, one built on discipline, transparency, and moral consistency. Behind palace walls, it was clear, the era of quiet bailouts and royal exceptions was over, replaced by a system that demanded accountability even from those born into the crown. The duchy is not a safety net for bad decisions. Those words, first declared by Prince William in January 2026, had become more than a statement, they were now royal doctrine. For William, this was never about a brotherly feud, it was about the credibility of the monarchy in a new era, allowing even a quiet bailout he believed would send a disastrous message that disloyalty could be rewarded and that financial recklessness carried no price. So instead of sentiment, the future king chose principle over privilege and integrity over indulgence. His message to Parliament, the Crown, and the public was unmistakable. We have moved forward. By the night of January 20th, every path had closed. There would be no royal assistance, no security reinstatement, no legal or logistical help, and no reply to Harry's final handwritten appeal. At Riven Rock, the once grand gates stood slightly ajar, rain drizzling over the courtyard. Inside, the guesthouse lights flickered faintly, a ghostly reminder of what once was. On the balcony stood a man who had once been one of the most beloved princes in the world, now staring out into the fog, watching his story collapse in real time. The Sussexes were no longer suspended from royal life, they were severed. The silence from Buckingham Palace was deafening but intentional. It wasn't indifference, it was strategy. The Crown had chosen not to fight in the press, but to speak through restraint. Behind that silence was a clear message to every royal observer, every institution, every future heir. The monarchy protects itself now. As the Sussex household quietly unraveled, the palace's focus shifted from confrontation to consequence, tightening its hold on institutional integrity and reinforcing that royal privilege is not a shield from accountability. By January 21st, 2026, this new tone reached the corridors of Parliament, where peerage review discussions long considered too delicate to touch were quietly reactivated by senior lawmakers. Backed by the Cabinet Office, the question on the table was one that once seemed unthinkable. Should the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex still stand? The monarchy's message was no longer whispered. It was being written into policy. Originally granted in 2018, the Sussex titles, once symbols of modern royal progress, were now viewed as reputational liabilities. A confidential memo circulating through the House of Lords warned that inherited privilege was being weaponized against the national image. The document referenced not just the Netflix fallout, but also Meghan's unsanctioned podcast comments about Tyler Perry and the diversion of the Diana Memorial Fund donations. The debate had moved beyond Buckingham Palace. It was now a constitutional issue. Meanwhile, inside the Sussex household, collapse was coming fast and hard. By January 20th, the couple's flagship charity, Archwell Foundation, had effectively shut down. Once promoted as a bold new vision of philanthropy with purpose, it had quietly crumbled behind the scenes. All full-time employees were either furloughed or dismissed. The Mayfair office in London was permanently closed, and the Archwell Kids division, which had been planned as their family-centered brand, was officially dissolved. No new grants or donations had been recorded since October 2025, and the foundation's internal communications network had been suspended entirely. On paper, Archwell was now in what legal advisors delicately described as administrative hibernation, a non-profit limbo status meant to delay lawsuits and regulatory probes while an organization quietly winds itself down. But the financial filings told an even harsher truth. Documents obtained from the California Registry of Charitable Trusts showed that Archwell's unrestricted reserves had dropped below $1.1 million, making it legally unsustainable beyond March 2026. And just as the foundation's last lifeline slipped away, another blow hit. WME, Meghan's high-profile agency, pulled her proposed documentary series, Motherhood and Reinvention, which had been slated for a spring 2026 release. The reason? A carefully worded statement citing reputational risk and external legal entanglements. For Meghan, it was a devastating reversal. The very project meant to rebuild her image had become another casualty in the storm. For Harry, it confirmed what insiders already whispered. Every pillar of the Sussex brand, royal, charitable, and commercial, was collapsing all at once. The collapse was total. No donors, no projects, no platform, just paperwork, silence, and shuttered doors. Rather than commenting directly on the Sussexes' financial unraveling, the senior royals pivoted to principle. On January 21st, Princess Anne took the stage at the International Trust and Governance Forum in Geneva, delivering a powerful speech that many insiders believed was a carefully veiled response to the crisis brewing back home. Her words were sharp, disciplined, and deliberate. Institutions are not defined by applause, but by how they respond to pressure and principle. She never once mentioned Harry. She didn't need to. The meaning was crystal clear. There is no space for self-inflicted scandal in a system built on duty, she added, her tone cutting through the hall like glass. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine made her stance just as firm, though far quieter. Meghan's media team had reportedly reached out with a proposal for a joint mental health campaign, hoping to soften the narrative and rebuild public goodwill. Catherine's answer was short, restrained, but undeniably final. Promises were made and not kept. Children don't need campaigns, they need consistency. It was the clearest rejection yet, a reminder that royal reputation is earned, not repaired by PR. Then came Prince William's own moment. At a Windsor Castle reception that same evening, a reporter dared to ask if he had spoken to his brother amid the turmoil. William didn't flinch. His answer came calmly, without anger or bitterness, just finality. We have moved forward. No grief, no argument, no nostalgia, just closure. By the end of January 21st, discussions within Parliament had evolved from quiet review to active strategy. Lawmakers were now openly weighing the peerage issue, whether the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex should still stand. Though peerage revocation is a rare and complex process requiring both royal assent and statutory approval, the fact that it was even on the table signaled a historic shift, one that showed the Crown's message had changed from forgiveness to finality. The cabinet briefing held that morning marked the first formal government inquiry into whether the Sussex titles were being used commercially in violation of the 2024 Royal Ethics Guidance. Officials also examined whether the couple's ongoing conduct could amount to defamation by proxy of the monarchy, and whether revoking their titles might set a new precedent for post-abdication accountability. One senior MP, speaking anonymously, summed it up bluntly: "This is no longer about freedom of expression, it's about the abuse of national identity for private leverage." While Westminster debated policy and protocol, back in Montecito, Riven Rock had become a shadow of its former self. The guesthouse lights flickered dimly behind drawn curtains. The once luxurious master wing sat eerily staged for discreet NDA-protected viewings under protocol lapis, and the children's nursery had been condensed into a single shared room. The driveway, once lined with Range Rovers, stylists, and private security, now sat empty, rain pooling across the cobblestones. Every symbol of glamour had vanished, leaving behind only silence. And in that silence stood one solitary figure. Prince Harry, spotted standing on the balcony of the upper floor on the night of January 21st, alone beneath the heavy drizzle. The rain gathered on the flagstones as he looked out toward the mist-covered hills. No staff in sight, no movement inside. He didn't need to speak. Everything around him said it all. The quiet retreat, the shuttered estate, the empty courtyard. What had begun as an escape for freedom had ended in isolation by design. Later that night, a neighbor walking the ridge above 765 Rockbridge Road paused and lifted her binoculars. Through the drifting fog, she caught a fleeting glimpse. Prince Harry standing motionless on the guesthouse balcony, completely still under a silver curtain of rain. That haunting image, a lone figure in the mist, became the silent metaphor for what had unfolded, the fall of a prince who traded tradition for independence, only to discover that freedom without foundation can feel like exile. No staff, no security detail, no sound of movement. Just him. He wasn't pacing or on the phone. The neighbor later told reporters he was just standing there completely still, staring at nothing. It was the final image of a prince once seen as the future of a modern monarchy, a man poised to rewrite the royal playbook, now reduced to a silhouette in the rain. But the dream didn't explode in scandal or betrayal, it faded, quietly and relentlessly. Faded from relevance, from protection, and finally from memory. By January 22nd, Archwell's final financial accounts were officially submitted for internal audit. There were no new announcements, no interviews, no campaigns, and no trace of the media empire that had once promised to change the world. Hollywood had gone silent. Buckingham Palace remained quiet. The public, divided but largely unmoved. Not because they didn't care, but because the story had simply run its course. They built a brand around burning bridges, said one former donor, and then they ran out of wood. Inside Buckingham Palace, business continued as usual. Meetings resumed without pause. Jubilee planning moved ahead. Princess Anne returned to her security summit in Berlin. Princess Catherine reviewed new proposals for the Diana Memorial Fund, focusing on school expansions in Leeds. Not a single insider brought up Montecito. Not once. In internal documents and royal briefings, the Sussex name was gone, deleted from meeting notes, omitted from diplomatic briefings, and absent from protocol memos. The silence wasn't hostile, it was structural. The Crown had moved on. As one Privy Council official put it bluntly, they are no longer part of the institution's story, they are a footnote to its caution. And just like that, the chapter that began with glamour, rebellion, and hope ended in quiet erasure, a royal saga that didn't explode but evaporated. The refusal to comment is the comment. That's how one insider summed up the Crown's stance. Some sympathized with Harry and Meghan, others condemned them, but for the monarchy, this moment wasn't personal. It was structural. For years, the royal institution had worked to modernize without surrendering its integrity, tightening financial oversight and enforcing moral boundaries in a new world of streaming deals, celebrity branding, and public scrutiny. This wasn't about punishment, said one senior aide. It was about defending the institution from slow erosion. Every exception weakens the whole. In this new age of monarchy, loyalty is no longer sentimental. It's measured, verified, and earned. For Prince William, blocking the $36 million bailout request wasn't just a financial decision, it was a statement of leadership. His January 3rd directive, no bailout, no exceptions, has already been described by insiders as the defining moment of his transformation from heir apparent to de facto head of the monarchy. His leadership model is firm, procedural, and unshaken by emotional appeals, the opposite of the turbulence that once defined royal crisis management. As one palace source noted, he may not wear the crown yet, but his signature is already written across its future. The titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex still technically stand, but with peerage discussions now quietly active in Parliament, they feel less like honors and more like costumes left behind on a darkened stage. Meanwhile, Riven Rock remains on the private market, shrouded in confidentiality. There are no confirmed buyers, no open escrow, and Archwell remains suspended in limbo. Public trust has fractured. Hollywood has turned away. The palace has moved forward. And somewhere in Montecito, Harry and Meghan remain. Not exiled, but isolated, symbols of a royal rebellion that promised reinvention and ended in retreat. The crown, steadier and colder than ever, has spoken through silence, reminding the world that in the modern monarchy, legacy isn't inherited, it's maintained. Still without insurance, still facing a $20 million Netflix clawback, and still knocking on doors that no longer open, the Sussex story has reached its quiet, inevitable end. This was never just a royal feud. It was a slow, silent divorce from legacy, from structure, from discipline itself. Harry and Meghan once believed they could rebrand royalty, make it modern, marketable, and deeply personal. They tried to turn a centuries-old institution into a global lifestyle brand, powered by cameras, contracts, and charisma. But somewhere in the glitter, the message blurred. They learned that fame isn't fortune and that autonomy isn't immunity. In choosing freedom, they walked away from the system. In mismanaging that freedom, they walked away from sustainability. And in defying its ethics, they walked straight into exile. As one former palace aide put it best, the crown doesn't exile anyone, but it does forget them, thoroughly and forever. And so ends the chapter of the Sussex experiment, a tale of rebellion that turned into retreat, of independence that dissolved into isolation, and of a royal promise that vanished into silence. If you followed this journey to the end, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice keeps the story alive even when the royals refuse to speak.